There is a name that, when spoken, sounds less like a place and more like a whisper from a forgotten age. A name that belongs to a kingdom erased from the maps of common knowledge, yet one that once stood as an equal to the titans of the ancient world: Rome, Persia, and China. Imagine a civilization built on gold and faith, hidden deep within the fortress of the African mountains. A kingdom that guarded a secret so profound it would shape the destiny of a nation for millennia. This is the story of that kingdom, the story of Aksum, and the story of why some call it the Atlantis of Africa. The name itself, Aksum, feels ancient on the tongue. It does not crash into the ear like Rome, nor does it carry the weight of empire like Persia. Instead, it drifts, like the scent of incense from a hidden sanctuary, a sound that belongs to the high, thin air of the mountains. To understand Aksum, you must first understand its home. Picture a land of dramatic extremes, a vast plateau of rugged mountains and deep chasms carved by time, so high it is often called the rooftop of Africa. This is the Ethiopian highlands, a natural fortress walled off by sheer cliffs and harsh deserts. For millennia, this geography has served as both a sanctuary and a prison, isolating its people from the world below, while allowing them to cultivate a civilization entirely their own. It is a place where history is not confined to books, but is etched into the very landscape, written in the stone of its mountains and carried in the blood of its rivers. This kingdom, which flourished from roughly the 1st to the 7th century, is not a mere footnote in the annals of history. It was a powerhouse, a cosmopolitan hub of trade and culture whose influence stretched from the African interior across the Red Sea and into the Arabian Peninsula. Roman sea captains knew its port, Adulis, as a bustling marketplace of unimaginable wealth. They spoke of endless caravans carrying ivory, rhinoceros horns, gold dust, and emeralds from the heart of Africa. More precious than all of these were the aromatic resins, frankincense, and myrrh, substances so valuable in the ancient world that they were worth their weight in gold, used in the temples of Rome and the palaces of pharaohs. Aksum controlled this sacred trade, this fragrant artery of the ancient economy, and in doing so, it grew fantastically wealthy and powerful. Its rulers did not live in mud huts. They commanded from stone palaces, minted their own currency in gold, silver, and bronze, and ordered the creation of monuments so audacious they challenge our understanding of early engineering. So why the comparison to Atlantis? The legend of Atlantis, as told by Plato, is the story of a mighty island nation, advanced and powerful, that vanished into the sea in a single day and night, lost to history and relegated to myth. Aksum did not sink beneath the waves, but it performed a similar vanishing act. For centuries, it was a brilliant light in the ancient world, a civilization in constant dialogue with its powerful neighbors. And then, as the 7th century waned, the light began to flicker. Communication with the outside world slowed to a trickle, then stopped almost entirely. The kingdom withdrew from its coastal territories, pulling back into its mountain heartland. It turned its back on the sea and on the world it had once helped to shape. It effectively disappeared from the historical record of other nations. For nearly 1,000 years, Aksum became a ghost, a memory. What was once a thriving international empire became an isolated inland kingdom, shrouded in legend. The world forgot about Aksum. And this is the heart of the mystery. Great empires fall, they are conquered, they crumble. But Aksum did not just fall, it receded. It pulled a curtain of mountain mist around itself and simply vanished from view. The land itself seems to conspire in keeping these secrets. To travel through this region today is to feel as though you are walking through a dream of the past. The air is clear and cool, and the silence of the high plateaus is broken only by the wind. It is a silence that feels heavy with unspoken stories. You can see churches, not built from the ground up, but carved down into the living rock of the earth, their roofs level with the ground you stand on. These are monuments of a faith so profound it sought to turn the world itself into a sanctuary. You can feel the presence of something ancient in the soil, in the way the sunlight falls across the terraced fields that climb the mountainsides, a farming technique practiced here for thousands of years. This is not a dead civilization. It is a sleeping one. The ruins of Aksum are not like the ruins of Rome, picked apart by tourists and neatly cordoned off. They are an integral part of the landscape and of life. The descendants of the Aksumites still live here, speaking a language derived from the ancient script of Ge'ez and practicing a form of Christianity that has remained unique and unchanged for over 1,700 years. Therefore, our story is not one of digging through dust for forgotten relics. It is a journey into a living mystery. We must ask questions that history books often ignore. What kind of civilization could erect a single piece of carved granite weighing over 500 tons? What kind of faith could inspire a people to carve entire cathedrals out of the mountainside? And most importantly, what could cause such a powerful, wealthy, and connected kingdom to deliberately sever its ties with the known world and retreat into a self-imposed isolation that would last for centuries? Was it an act of desperation, a kingdom in decline fleeing from its enemies? Or was it an act of preservation, a kingdom choosing to become a fortress, not to keep others out, but to protect something sacred within? The whispers from this sunken empire speak of many things, of immense power, of divine faith, and of a deliberate, calculated disappearance. To find the truth, we must follow these whispers back to their source, back to a time when Aksum was not a mystery, but the vibrant center of its world. Let us now step through that curtain of mountain mist, back through the centuries, to a time when Aksum was not a whisper, but a resounding voice on the world stage. To witness Aksum at its zenith in the 3rd and 4th centuries is to witness a civilization brimming with confidence, wealth, and power. Our journey does not begin in the cool highlands of the capital, but down on the sweltering, sun-drenched coast of the Red Sea at the legendary port of Adulis. Here, the world came to trade. Imagine a harbor crowded with the masts of ships from every corner of the known world. Roman galleys with their square sails ride at anchor next to the elegant, triangular-sailed dhows of Arabian merchants. The air is thick and heavy, a dizzying cocktail of salt from the sea, the sweet, sacred smoke of frankincense from the warehouses, and the pungent aroma of exotic spices piled high on the docks. The sound is a symphony of commerce. You hear the rhythmic chanting of sailors hoisting cargo, the sharp, clipped tones of Greek, the official language of trade, mingling with the deep, guttural sounds of the local Ge'ez and Sabaean tongues. Merchants from Alexandria, draped in fine linen, haggle with Aksumite traders adorned with gold and ivory. They trade Roman wine, olive oil, and intricate glassware for the treasures of Africa. And what treasures they were! This was the gateway to a continent of wonders. From the docks of Adulis, the world received immense tusks of ivory, harder and whiter than that of India, shimmering gold dust gathered from secret riverbeds, and brilliant green emeralds mined from the deep earth. Tortoise shells, prized for their beauty, were stacked high alongside the horns of rhinoceros, believed to hold powerful medicinal properties. But the true currency of this port, the source of its legendary status, came from the arid lands nearby. This was the home of the finest frankincense and myrrh in the world, the crystallized resins of desert trees that were the lifeblood of religious ceremony, from the temples of Jupiter in Rome to the fire altars of Zoroastrian Persia. Aksum held a near monopoly on this divine commodity. It was said that the smoke of Aksumite incense carried the prayers of humanity to the heavens. Through this single port, Aksum held the keys to the world's spiritual and economic life. From the chaos of the coast, a great stone road snaked upwards, climbing from the humid plains into the crisp, clear air of the highlands. For days, caravans of camels and mules, laden with goods from overseas, would make the arduous journey to the capital city, also named Aksum. To arrive in the city was to understand the true source of the kingdom's power. This was not a temporary settlement of mud and wood. This was a metropolis of stone, a city built to last for eternity. The elite lived in multi-story palaces, grand structures of granite and timber, with a unique architectural style of alternating layers of stone and wood. The most distinctive feature was the projecting wooden support beams, nicknamed monkey heads, that jutted out from the walls, a signature of Aksumite engineering. The city was meticulously planned, with distinct residential, commercial, and ceremonial areas, all dominated by a great central park filled with a forest of stone.
This was the Steely Field, the most breathtaking and enigmatic legacy of Aksum here. The rulers of the kingdom erected colossal monuments to mark their tombs and proclaim their eternal power. They are not rough, unhewn stones like those of Stonehenge. They are monolithic giants, single pieces of solid granite, quarried from miles away and carved with astonishing precision. Imagine standing at the foot of the Great Steely, a stone needle stretching over 100 feet into the sky, weighing more than 500 tons, making it one of the largest single pieces of stone ever shaped and erected by human hands in the ancient world. It was a skyscraper of the ancient age. These stelae were carved to look like the palaces they stood near, with false doors at their base and intricate patterns of false windows climbing their entire height, as if they were ethereal towers meant to house the spirits of the kings on their journey to the afterlife. How did a civilization without modern machinery manage to quarry, transport, and raise these leviathans of stone? The question baffles engineers to this day, and the stones themselves offer no answers. They simply stand in silent testament to a kingdom that could command the landscape itself. This immense power was not just a local phenomenon. Aksum saw itself as a world power, and remarkably, so did the rest of the world. In the 3rd century, the influential Persian prophet and philosopher Mahani, when listing the great empires of his time, named only for "There are 4 great kingdoms on earth," he wrote. The first is the kingdom of Babylon and Persia. The second is the kingdom of Rome. The third is the kingdom of the and the fourth is the kingdom of the Chinese. Think of what this means. In an age of legendary empires, Aksum was counted among their number, an equal player on the grandest stage. This confidence is literally stamped onto their coins. Aksum was one of the first African civilizations to mint its own currency, and its rulers used it for propaganda. Early coins show the king framed by a crescent and disc, symbols of the old gods of Arabia. But later, following the conversion of the kingdom, the coins changed dramatically. They are now stamped with the Christian cross, making Aksum one of the very first kingdoms in the world to officially place the cross on its currency, a bold declaration of its new faith to all who traded with it. This was a civilization in its golden age, a master of trade, a builder of monuments, and a confident actor in the great game of ancient empires. It stood at the crossroads of the world, bathed in the light of its own wealth and glory, seemingly destined to last forever. But the foundation of this great kingdom was not built on stone or gold alone. It was built upon a story so powerful it would become the central pillar of a nation's identity, the divine mandate for its emperors, and the seed of its most profound and enduring mystery. To understand Aksum, one cannot simply study its trade routes and its monuments. One must listen to its epic, the sacred narrative known as the Kebra Nagast, or the Glory of Kings. This is the story that transformed Aksum from a kingdom of merchants into a kingdom of guardians. It begins, as all great legends do, with a journey in the 10th century before Christ. The tales of a king of immense wisdom in Jerusalem reached the far corners of the earth. His name was Solomon, and his knowledge was said to be a direct gift from God. In the land that would one day be ruled by Aksum, there reigned a powerful and intelligent queen, known to the world as the Queen of Sheba, but known to her own people as Makeda. She was not a conqueror, but a seeker of truth, and her curiosity about this famously wise king grew into an obsession. She could not simply accept the stories. She had to test this wisdom for herself. And so she gathered a great caravan, laden with the finest treasures of her kingdom, gold, precious gems, and the rarest spices. She undertook the long and perilous journey across the deserts of Arabia and north to the gates of Jerusalem. The meeting between Solomon and Makeda was not one of political maneuvering, but a meeting of minds. She presented him with a series of difficult riddles and complex questions, testing the depths of his famous intellect, and Solomon, in his wisdom, answered them all. The queen was captivated. She stayed for months, learning from him, studying how he governed his people with justice and divine guidance. A deep respect grew between the two monarchs, which blossomed into love. When the time came for Queen Makeda to return to her own land, she carried with her not only the wisdom of Solomon, but also his child. She would give birth to a son, whom she named Menelik, which means son of the wise man. Years passed, and Menelik grew into a strong and handsome young man, bearing a striking resemblance to the king he had never met. When he came of age, he journeyed to Jerusalem himself to see his father. Solomon received him with great joy and honor, recognizing him immediately as his firstborn son. He offered Menelik the throne of Israel, begging him to stay and rule after him. But Menelik's loyalty was to his mother and to the land of his birth. He politely refused the offer, insisting he must return to Ethiopia. Solomon, though saddened, agreed, but on one condition, that the firstborn sons of all his high priests and nobles would accompany Menelik back to his own land, to help him establish a kingdom modeled on the divine laws of Israel. And here, the story takes a turn that changes the course of history. As the young men of Jerusalem's elite prepared for their long journey to a new land, a secret and audacious plan was put into motion, one said to be ordained by God himself. The son of the high priest Azariah had a dream in which an angel commanded him to take the Ark of the Covenant with them. The Ark was the most sacred object in all of Judaism, a golden chest built to hold the stone tablets on which God had inscribed the 10 Commandments. It was the physical manifestation of God's presence on earth, a relic of unimaginable power. Under the cover of darkness, the young priests created a perfect replica of the Ark. They placed this replica in the Holy of Holies, the sacred inner chamber of Solomon's temple. and they took the true ark. When Menelik and his companions departed from Jerusalem, they carried with them, in secret, the very heart of Israel's faith. The journey home was said to be miraculous. The ark lifted them over obstacles, protected them from harm, and moved with a supernatural speed. When King Solomon discovered the switch, he realized it was not a theft, but a divine transfer. God's favor, he concluded, had passed from his house to the house of his firstborn son. This story is everything. It is the reason Aksum and the nation of Ethiopia that followed is sometimes called the Second Zion. It established the Solomonic dynasty, the unbroken line of emperors who would claim direct descent from Solomon and Sheba, a lineage that would last for 3,000 years, ending only with the fall of Emperor Haile Selassie in 1974. Their right to rule was absolute, for it flowed not from conquest, but from the blood of the wisest king and the will of God. More than that, this belief reshaped the entire purpose of the kingdom. Aksum was no longer just a wealthy, trading empire. It was now the chosen sanctuary for the Ark of the Covenant. Its mountains were the walls of a new temple, its armies were the new Levites, and its king was the new high priest. Every aspect of the kingdom's identity became tied to this sacred trust. It is a secret they would guard with their lives, a secret that could very well explain why a kingdom at the height of its power might choose, centuries later, to turn its back on the world and disappear into the shadows. Its greatest treasure was not its gold, but its God, and that treasure had to be protected at all costs. But legends, however powerful, can feel as thin as smoke, drifting through the ages and changing with every telling. A kingdom cannot be built entirely on a story, or can it? To truly grasp the reality of Aksum, to feel the weight of its ambition and the depth of its transformation, we must now turn from the spoken word to the silent evidence left behind in stone and metal. For Aksum, in its quiet retreat from the world, left behind a series of clues, artifacts that tell a story just as epic as the Kebra Nagast. A story of power, faith, and a radical change in the soul of a civilization. Our investigation begins in that silent forest of stone we have already glimpsed, the great steely field of a KSUM. To walk among these granite titans is a humbling experience. They are not merely grave markers. They are defiant shouts aimed at the heavens, declarations of power intended to awe and intimidate. Let us reconsider the largest of them all, the great Stele. Though it now lies broken on the ground, a fallen giant, its original statistics are staggering. It stood nearly 110 feet tall, taller than a 10-story building, and weighed an estimated 520 tons. This single piece of granite, the weight of 3 blue whales, was quarried from a site miles away. It was then somehow transported over uneven terrain and, most remarkably, erected into a perfectly vertical position. Even with the finest modern cranes and computers, such a feat would be a monumental challenge today. The Aksumites achieved it nearly 2,000 years ago, and this was not the only one. Dozens of these monolithic spears pierce the sky or lie in repose across the field. These were the tombstones of Aksum's early pre-Christian rulers. They are monuments to a worldview centered on ancestral glory and a king's journey into the afterlife. Beneath the largest stele lie vast, subterranean tomb complexes, multi-chambered palaces for the dead. The most famous is the Tomb of the False Door, an intricate labyrinth of stone corridors and chambers, built with the same precision as the monuments that towered above it. The stele themselves are carved to resemble these palaces, with intricate false doors and windows etched into their surfaces. The door, it was believed, allowed the soul of the deceased king to come and go, to travel between the world of the living and the realm of the spirits. These stones are a bridge between worlds. They represent a people obsessed with legacy, with ensuring their kings would live on, their power and prestige projected for all eternity, not just on earth, but in the heavens as well. They are the ultimate expression of a civilization at the peak of its material power and earthly ambition, while the steely shout Aksum's power to the heavens. A much smaller, more intimate story is told by the objects that pass through the hands of its people every day, their coins. These small discs of gold, silver, and bronze are tiny, metallic storytellers, and the tale they tell is one of the most dramatic spiritual transformations in the ancient world. Aksum was unique. It was the first civilization native to Africa to mint its own coinage, a practice that was a profound statement of sovereignty. To create your own money was to declare yourself an equal to the great empires. The earliest coins, from the late 3rd century, belonged to kings like Indubis. His portrait is on the front, and he is flanked by 2 sheaves of barley, a symbol of fertility and the wealth of the land. Above his head are the symbols of the old gods, a crescent moon and a disk, deities brought over from South Arabia. The inscriptions are in Greek, the language of international trade, a clear sign that these coins were designed to be used across their vast commercial network. Then, in the middle of the 4th century, under a king named Uzana, everything changes. The early coins of Azana's reign followed the old pattern, with the crescent and the disk. But suddenly, the design is radically altered. The pagan symbols vanish, and in their place, for the first time, appears the Christian cross. This was not a subtle hint. This was a nationwide broadcast, a declaration sent to every corner of the trading world on every piece of gold and silver that left the kingdom. It announced that Aksum had a new god. King Azana, who came to the throne, a pagan, had converted to Christianity, and he was taking his entire kingdom with him. Aksum became one of the first empires in the entire world to officially adopt Christianity as its state religion, even before the Roman Empire did. The coins are the undeniable proof. They are a perfect timeline, written in metal, of a nation's soul turning on its axis when viewed together. The stones and the coins tell the complete story of Aksum's dual identity. The towering stelae are the legacy of a pagan past, a culture reaching for a physical, ancestral immortality. They are monuments of worldly power. The coins, however, chart a different path. They show the kingdom turning away from that old ambition and embracing a new identity, a new faith centered not on the glory of kings, but on the worship of a single God. This profound shift helps explain the legend of the Ark. The conversion to Christianity did not erase the kingdom's sacred legends. It reframed them. The Aksumites came to see themselves not just as Christians, but as the inheritors of Israel's old covenant, the guardians of a sacred trust. The material evidence and the sacred story began to merge, creating a civilization unlike any other, a kingdom whose power was now matched by its divine purpose. It is this unique combination of might and mission that makes what happened next so profoundly mysterious. For a kingdom to be so powerful, so wealthy, and so certain of its divine purpose, makes its eventual fate all the more baffling. Empires are not meant to simply fade away. They are meant to leave behind a legacy of conquest and law, of language and culture, that is woven into the fabric of the civilizations that follow. And while Aksum certainly left a legacy, it is one defined more by what was hidden than by what was shared. From the 7th century onwards, the brilliant light of Aksum began to dim. Its voice in the Council of Nations grew quiet, then fell silent. What happened? What could bring such a mighty kingdom to its knees? There is no single, simple answer carved into stone. Instead, there are echoes and theories, whispers from history that offer different explanations for why the shadow fell upon Aksum. The first whisper speaks not of armies or invasions, but of a betrayal by the earth itself. This is the theory of environmental collapse, a slow and creeping catastrophe. For centuries, the Aksumite civilization had thrived on the generosity of the Ethiopian highlands. The rich, volcanic soil yielded bountiful harvests, and the forests provided timber for their grand palaces and fuel for their forges, which produced the iron tools and weapons that underpinned their strength. But this generosity was not infinite. The very success of Aksum may have sown the seeds of its own destruction. The immense population required more and more land for farming. The great forests were cleared for agriculture and for firewood, leaving the hillsides bare. The rains, which had once been as reliable as the sunrise, grew fickle, perhaps due to a larger shift in the global climate. When the rains did come, they were often torrential and without the trees to hold the earth in place. The precious topsoil washed away into the valleys, leaving behind barren, infertile rock. The land grew tired. Crop yields fell. Famine, a spectre that had been kept at bay for generations, began to stalk the kingdom. The power of the Aksumite kings was tied to their ability to provide for their people, to ensure the fertility of the land. As the soil eroded and the harvests failed, their authority may have eroded along with it. This was not a swift death at the end of a sword, but a slow, agonizing decline. It was a kingdom brought low not by a foreign enemy, but by the slow, silent rebellion of the very ground beneath its feet. A tragic lesson that even the most powerful civilizations are ultimately at the mercy of the natural world. The second whisper tells a different story. It is a story of geopolitics, of a world that changed, leaving Aksum stranded and alone. For centuries, Aksum's lifeblood had been the Red Sea. This narrow body of water was the great artery of commerce, connecting the Mediterranean world of the Roman Empire to the riches of India and the Far East. Aksum, with its powerful navy and its strategic port of Ajah, was the heart that pumped the life through this artery. But in the 7th century, a new and dynamic force exploded out of the Arabian Peninsula. The rise of Islam. The early Islamic caliphates expanded with breathtaking speed, conquering Persia, the Middle East, and all of North Africa, including Aksum's vital trading partner, Egypt. Suddenly, the Red Sea was no longer an open highway of commerce controlled by Aksum and its allies. It became an Arab lake. Aksum's trade routes were severed. The flow of goods and gold, the very source of its immense wealth, was pinched shut. The kingdom, which had once looked out upon the world from its coastline, was now cut off. It became an island of Christianity in a rapidly expanding sea of Islam. While early relations with the new Muslim powers were sometimes peaceful, the economic reality was devastating. Aksum was slowly being suffocated. Its connection to the wider Christian world, particularly the Byzantine Empire, was severed. It could no longer project its power onto the Arabian Peninsula. Its gaze was forced inward. This theory suggests that Aksum's retreat into the mountains was not a choice, but a necessity. It was a strategic withdrawal, an act of survival for a kingdom that found itself on the wrong side of a new world order. The third and most dramatic whisper is not one of slow decline, but of violent destruction. It is the story of a terrifying figure known as Queen Gudit, or Yodit, a name that means terrible in the local tongue. The historical details about Gudit are shrouded in legend, but the story passed down through Ethiopian tradition is a fearsome one. She was a powerful queen, said to be of the Jewish faith or a follower of old pagan gods, who in the middle of the 10th century unleashed a storm of fire and steel upon the Christian kingdom. According to the tales, she led a vast and destructive army from the south, burning Aksum's ancient churches and monasteries to the ground. She hunted down the members of the royal family, seeking to exterminate the Solomonic line entirely. She is portrayed as a cataclysm, a vengeful force that laid waste to centuries of Aksumite civilization in a single, bloody campaign. While many historians doubt the specifics of this legend, suggesting Gudit may have been a composite figure representing a period of internal rebellion and religious strife, the story speaks to a collective memory of a deeply traumatic event. It represents a period of chaos and violence that shattered the old kingdom. Whether by a single queen's hand or through years of civil war, this theory points to a violent, internal collapse that tore the kingdom apart. Perhaps the truth, as it so often does, lies in a combination of all three whispers. Imagine a kingdom already weakened by famine and environmental decline. Imagine that same kingdom being economically isolated and cut off from its allies. Such a civilization would be brittle, vulnerable, and ripe for a final, shattering blow, whether from an external invader like Queen Gudit or from internal chaos. The shadow that fell over Aksum was likely woven from threads of climate change, economic isolation, and violent conflict, a perfect storm that brought an end to one of the world's great golden ages. And yet, the story does not end in ashes. For even as the kingdom fell, its most precious secret was carried away into the darkness, to be protected and preserved, waiting for the dawn of a new age. Empires turn to dust. Palaces crumble, trade routes shift like desert sands, and the names of powerful kings are worn away by time. This is the unavoidable truth of history. But an idea, a faith, a sacred trust, that is far harder to kill. The political entity of the Aksumite Empire may have dissolved in the chaos of the 10th century, but the soul of Aksum did not die. It went into hiding. It condensed itself into a single, potent belief, a flame cupped in careful hands, carried through a long and dark age to be preserved for the future. To find this living legacy, we must travel to the modern town of Aksum, a dusty, unassuming place that feels nothing like the capital of a great empire. Yet here, within a quiet, walled compound, lies what millions believe to be the spiritual center of the world. The compound is that of the Church of St. Mary of Zion. It is a place of contrasts. There is an old, fortress-like cathedral built in the 17th century and a massive, modern cathedral built in the 20th. But nestled between them is a small, plain, almost disappointingly simple square chapel. It is surrounded by a high iron fence, and it is guarded with the utmost seriousness. This humble building, known as the Chapel of the Tablet, is, according to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, the final resting place of the Ark of the Covenant. The air around it feels different, charged with a palpable reverence and an impenetrable secrecy. For within this chapel, a tradition has been carried on unbroken. For what is claimed to be thousands of years, this is the tradition of the Guardian. At this very moment, as you listen to these words, a single man lives within that compound. He is a specially chosen virgin monk who has dedicated his entire existence to a single task, to watch over the Ark. He is the only person on earth permitted to lay eyes upon the sacred relic. He is chosen for life, often designated by his predecessor on his deathbed. From the moment he accepts his duty, he renounces the world. He can never again leave the chapel grounds. He will never see his family again. His days and nights are spent in prayer and chanting before the object he protects. His sole purpose is to be a living guardian, a human vessel for an ancient vow. No one else is permitted to enter. Not the patriarch of the Ethiopian church, not the president of the country. Foreign dignitaries and curious historians have pleaded for a glimpse. All have been denied. This absolute, unwavering secrecy is the ultimate proof for the faithful and the ultimate frustration for the skeptical. The guardian lives and dies in solitude, a silent sentinel in a chain stretching back into the mists of time, ensuring the secret of Aksum remains safe after the political collapse. The center of Ethiopian power shifted south, away from the no vulnerable northern frontier. A new dynasty, the Zag, rose to power, and it was they who commissioned one of the most astonishing wonders of the world, the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela. These are not buildings in the traditional sense. They are immense, intricate cathedrals sculpted out of the living volcanic rock of the mountains, carved from the top down into the earth. But the Zagwe did not see themselves as replacing Aksum. They saw themselves as continuing its legacy. Aksum remained the holy city, the spiritual anchor of the nation, even as other cities held the political power. This period of withdrawal, this dark age, can be seen in a new light. Perhaps the fall of Aksum's worldly empire was the very thing that saved its spiritual soul. By losing its ports, its wealth, and its international prestige, it ceased to be a tempting target for conquest. Its isolation became its shield. The kingdom sacrificed its body to save its heart. That heart beats on today within the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, one of the oldest Christian denominations in the world. To witness its ceremonies is to step back in time. The priests chant in the ancient language of Giez, the language of the Aksumite kings. The sacred texts are written on parchment in this beautiful, ancient script. The calendar they follow, the food laws they observe, the very structure of their liturgy, all of it is a living continuation of the traditions established in Aksum over 1700 years ago. It is a form of Christianity that feels profoundly ancient and uniquely African, a direct link to the world we have been exploring. And for the tens of millions of faithful, the presence of the Ark in Aksum is not a legend or a theory. It is a foundational, unquestionable truth, the very fact upon which their universe is ordered. The great empire of gold and gods is gone, but the kingdom of the guardians remains. Aksum never truly died. It simply transformed, trading a crown of gold for a vow of silence, and an earthly empire for a divine mission that continues to this day. And so, our journey through the mists of time comes to a close. We have traveled from the first ghostly whispers of a forgotten name to the dazzling light of a golden age. We have stood in the shadow of its granite giants and held its tiny, storytelling coins in our hands. We have listened to the sacred story that beats at the heart of the nation, witnessed the perfect storm that brought the kingdom to its knees, and discovered the unbroken chain of guardians who ensure its legacy can never truly die. We arrive, at the end, not at a final, simple answer, but at the edge of a profound and enduring mystery. The story of Aksum is a story of paradoxes. It was a global power that chose isolation, a wealthy empire that prioritized faith over commerce, A civilization that vanished from the world stage, perhaps to ensure its own survival. We are left with the great unanswerable question: was the decline of Aksum a historical accident, a tragic casualty of a changing climate and shifting political tides? Or was it, in some way, an act of will? Was the retreat into the mountains the most successful act of cultural and spiritual preservation the world has ever known? A deliberate sacrifice of worldly power to fulfill a sacred duty? We cannot know for sure. The truth remains locked away in the subterranean tombs of its kings and in the silent, guarded chapel where a lone monk keeps his vigil. The historical record provides clues, but faith provides the narrative. And in Ethiopia, that narrative is everything. The title, The Atlantis of Africa, now feels both fitting and incomplete. Like Atlantis, Aksum is a story of a brilliant civilization that disappeared from the main stage of history, leaving behind more questions than answers. But unlike the legend of Atlantis, a story of divine punishment and a kingdom lost to the sea, the story of Aksum may be one of divine purpose. A kingdom that did not sink beneath the waves, but rather deliberately submerged itself beneath a veil of secrecy and mountain fog, trading a visible empire for an invisible sanctuary. It chose not to be lost, but to be hidden. Tonight, as the cool air settles over the Ethiopian highlands, the great stelae stand as they have for nearly 2 millennia, dark silhouettes against a river of stars. They are silent witnesses to the rise and fall of their creators. And in the heart of the town, in a small, simple building, a solitary guardian keeps his vow, his quiet prayers a single, unbroken thread connecting the ancient past to the immediate present. The stones do not speak. The guardian will not tell. And the mountains of Ethiopia continue to keep their secrets. The story of Aksum reminds us that the greatness of a civilization is not always measured by the lands it conquered or the wealth it amassed. Some are defined by what they create. Others are defined by what they protect. And as you drift into sleep, perhaps you can still hear it. A faint echo across the centuries, carried on the high mountain wind. It is not the sound of a kingdom that was lost, but of a promise that is still being kept. Thank you for venturing with me into the highlands of Ethiopia, and for dedicating your time to this chapter from our collection at Forbidden Lore. The history of our world is not a single, cleanly written book, but a library of scattered pages, with many of the most fascinating chapters, like that of Aksum, intentionally hidden away or simply forgotten by time. We believe that listening to these stories is not just an act of curiosity, but an act of remembrance. If you are a fellow seeker of these lost narratives, and you wish to continue our expeditions into the shadows of history, I invite you to subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you ensure that these whispers from the past will find their way to you. There are countless more stories waiting in the archives, each one holding a piece of the puzzle of who we are. I am always fascinated by the thoughts of this community. What do you truly believe is the great secret of Aksum? Is it a physical, sacred object hidden from the world? Or is it the story of a faith so powerful it could convince an empire to choose eternity over glory? Let the archives below this video fill with your theories. Until we meet again, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the lore that was forbidden.